It's the mark of booty.
Shit. Nah. Love the royal priesthood. Mark of Buddha, Sekou the Madman, Killer Priest, Fourth Chambers, Full Fuji. This beat sound like something I wear. You dig? Yo, hold on my people, why you walking around like you equal? They wrote you in as 3/5, what we gon' do about this? Talk too much, you end up like Jimi Hendrix in 27 Club. You want that knowledge, well I'm the plug. Knowledge itself is the drug, and I keep dropping the nugs. Culture pushing, wisdom spitting, pimping simpletons into listening. Yawning while you spewing fiction. I can feel the tensions in your intentions. I wonder if that's Johnson heaven, if God is white, why he write that bronze was the sun? They give us reparations, that's when the apocalypse begins, yeah. Red rhyme, okay. Yeah. Red rhyme, better rhyme. Grab your guns, daughters and sons. Wasn't long ago when they had us hung. Blood on the leaves, frontal crumbled in between. Exhale for my ancestors that prevailed. We inhale, so we inhale, dodging death every day. Just happy I'm here to tell the tale. Meanwhile, y'all with the pigs and them tattletales. I'ma just be a scientist if it all fails. Mixing chemicals like a cocktail. My tree smell like it's from the tropical. So not for sale, never settle. Follow the tears on the trail. Nah.
That whole African American thing is to omit, you see, the indigenous black man of this particular land. When we brought the African American term, we cut out all of the Caribbean, all of South America, all of Latin America. This is another way to reclassify you, you see what I'm saying, outside of power.
We got blacks, whites, brown and yellow. We got red, those with dreads found from the ghetto. We got bullet-led and misled, the smile of the devil. On the face of the moon, heart pound like a rebel. Hear the sound of the metal, war in Iraq. 6 feet underground with the shovel, all over the map. The Bible said signs of the time. The Torah said that's your God, not mine. The Holy Quran says it's all Allah designed. The Buddhist says let's meet at the shrine. Thou shalt not eat of the swine. That you is the cut, sure as blue as the blood. Killer priests in the temple, Nehru is the love.
That's a political move that was put in by the government to break you down to this subclass, you see, and not be a world community. So to call you an African American is to disconnect you from that global community and that great diaspora that we were talking about. So that's a political move. Yes, come on. The average Native American was this brother's complexion at the turn of the century. Now when you say Native American, it's some white person with a feather in his hair.
All right. Greetings. Thank you, family, for joining us once again for another edition of New Day Resurrection and Liberation. All right. And so we're going to be having a discussion, getting into it a little bit on today. What folks' perspective is on the 4th of July. Okay. And where do Black folks fit in the framework of the American Revolution? Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit of historical context and dive into this question. Thank you once again for joining us for New Day Resurrection and Liberation. I am your brother, moderator and co-host this evening, Brother Lumumba Uncaged. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Hopefully folks can tear themselves away if they're engaged with their 4th of July celebrations for this evening. All right. Because we had to ask ourselves, family, what exactly is it that we're celebrating? What are we celebrating and why? These are the pertinent questions we have to ask ourselves, family, that I believe is imperative to ask ourselves when these horror days come around. Okay. Now I know, folks are used to dealing with aspects of, quote unquote traditions. A lot of these behaviors are habitual. Okay. We practice these different celebrations and rituals, if you will, based on the fact that that's what we did when we were children. That's what our parents did. That's what we did with our parents or our siblings or our friends. That's what our grandparents did. Okay, that's how you were taught. That's how you were raised. That's how you were acclimated to society. That's how you were indoctrinated. But we have to ask ourselves at the same time, how are these things serving us? How are these things serving our community? All right. How are these things serving the further growth and development of our people? How are these things affecting our psyche? All right. Are these things negative or positive? Are these things to our benefit or our detriment? All right. Or are they leaving us stagnant? So these are the questions we have to ask ourselves, family, that I believe is imperative to ask ourselves every time these horror days roll around. Okay. One of the questions we're going to ask ourselves is what our ancestor Frederick Douglass asked in his famous speech: what is the 4th of July to a slave? Message. Okay, so it's uh, super important, family, that we continuously deal with critical and analytical thinking, not just taking things for face value and because that's what we did, because that's what we've always done, but to really ask ourselves, how are these things serving us? Or are we serving these things? All right, so today, of course, we're dealing with the 4th of July horror day. All right. So with that being said, let me see if we got any opinions on this matter before I kick things off and start getting into some clips. Hopefully, we have Sister Empress that's going to be joining us shortly. She should be reporting live from Atlanta, from the ATL, in this uh, mass uh, exodus, to ATL for what is called No Genocide, No Kings Day, uh, and dealing with the 250 years of struggle for liberation for our people. All right. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit, getting the report there. Hopefully, when Sister Empress is able to tap in, um, with that demonstration that was put on by the People's Senate. All right. So hopefully, we'll get some live updates and reports from that event. All right. And of course, you're welcome to chime in the chat. There's a few spaces if folks want to come into the conversation with us here on StreamYard. All right, tapping into the yard. So thanks once again, family, for all those who will join us this evening for this edition of New Day Resurrection and Liberation. All right, with that being said, let me come over. I believe we have Baba Moses with us this evening. Let me come over and ask Baba Moses, what is your take? What's your perspective on the 4th of July? what's the relevancy to Black people here in America? Quote unquote African Americans. Were you doing any celebrating of the 4th of July today?
Oh, okay. Let me say, Frederick Douglass had it right. Within the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence itself, and the Declaration of Independence, Black folks weren't material enough to be mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, but they did manage to mention the indigenous people. They called them savages, and so this republic was for white men only, and it was never founded for indigenous people and people of color. And so, we need a new foundation, and we can't build on the old foundation. We need a new foundation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that addition, Baba Moses. Okay. All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about that as well. So I'm glad you made mention of that. All right, because I want to tap into that subject matter. Matter of fact, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Okay, and I want to make sure people are astute and aware of the contradictions of the country, and making sure that we understand true history, world history, holistically. All right, and not just dealing with, the remix of history, the pasteurized, homogenized American version of history or his story, where they choose to omit certain facts in order to save face and control the narrative. All right, so we have to have a sense of responsibility and accountability for the time, energy, effort, and economics that we are imbuing into the system, into these holidays or hard days, as I call it, and how we should be engaging within that perspective. Okay, so with that being said, let me come to my first video clip, and I'll jump on that topic and subject matter since you mentioned it, Baba Moses. Thank you for that addition. Shout out to the family, Sister Shirley Baker. All right, tapping in from North Carolina. Appreciate it, sis. Much Shay. All right. So yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen, and let me touch base on that subject, man. Oh, we do have Sister Empress. Okay. All right. Great. Sister Empress in the building. All right. How's everything?
All right. Give thanks, family. Welcome again to New Day. My apology for it being late. This has been a very long day. Of course, I'm here in Atlanta with my brother, spending some time with one of my brothers, and it's really so very interesting. I don't know where to begin, so I'm just going to hold on for a moment and let Brother Lumumba go to the clip. But I'll give you a report on today's session for the Spirit of Mandela. But I also want to talk a little more about where the movement is really going or not going. Okay, today was a crude awakening and really helped me to realize that, people often say, we got a lot of work, we got our work cut out for us. Well, more than you know. So I'm going to come back to that shortly.
All right, family. With that being said, let me get to that first clip, and let's get into some of the history of the U.S. and looking at the perspective of Independence Day. All right. Okay, so let me come to my first clip, family, and let's see what's going on here as it pertains to some of the initial constructs of democracy here in North America, or as was named or described by the native Turtle Island. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right, here we go, family.
2026 marks the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a milestone likely to be celebrated with the familiar spectacle of the 4th of July, block parties, legal or illegal fireworks, and the also comforting barbecue. It's also a time to look back on the past 250 years and reflect on American independence. But before we get the party started, let's look at the document that has since inspired every freedom lover's favorite holiday. Yes, all the greatest hits. Decent, respected opinions of mankind, very nice. All men are created equal, classified. Wait a minute. Merciless Indian savages, the one and only time Native Americans are mentioned. Now, this has really got me thinking. Can a national identity built on the erasure of Native genocide ever fully separate itself from propaganda? This is We the People of Native America. Me, Tyler Clare. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you remember reciting this mandatory allegiance before school? Well, maybe not those born after us millennials. America often frames democracy as one of its greatest achievements. The irony of it is that natives were the ones to inspire it. Well, obviously not the merciless Indian savages line. Even though American Indians were seen as primitive, we've practiced representative governance well before the American Revolution. Around 1142, according to many scholars, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, previously referred to as the Iroquois Confederacy, was formed, establishing relationships between tribal nations, which resulted in a democracy that has functioned for centuries. Within the Confederacy, they solidified an oral constitution described as the Great Law of Peace, which is considered one of the oldest living participatory democracies in the world. If you didn't know, I'm Mohawk, one of the 6 nations that make up the Confederacy. There's Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. Some of America's founding fathers were aware of the Haudenosaunee form of government, and some, like Benjamin Franklin, even met with members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, resulting in the blueprint for the U.S. Constitution. You can argue that tribal nations have been a model for democracy centuries before the U.S. started branding itself as the global founder. Of course, this information rarely makes it into textbooks, which is probably the reason why we have yet to receive any recognition. As always, U.S. propaganda gets in the way of the truth. Okay, so let's say the US didn't invent democracy, but they did fight for independence so they can get a little thing called liberty, right? I guess to them, liberty means freedom to embark on brutal invasions and occupation of indigenous lands. But before I get ahead of myself, in 1754, the French and British went to war over a land dispute in the Ohio Valley. Today, this war is referred to as the French-Indian War. This war had more to do with which colonizing country would expand their territory into North America. And different tribal nations made strategic decisions to side with either Great Britain or France, depending on who a tribe thought would be better to them. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy sided with Britain, while France worked with various tribes like the Algonquin. Another thing I bet you didn't learn in school. After the British victory, the colonists set their sights on westward expansion. The British tried to stop this expansion, not out of the kindness of their heart, but because endless frontier wars were draining their resources. To pay off their debt, the British Parliament ramped up their taxation of the colonies. The colonists, of course, weren't too happy about that. After the colonists were denied their dreams of free reign westward expansion while incurring more taxes, they were itching to cast off British rule, resulting in the Revolutionary War, which officially broke out in 1775. Among the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence, the founders cite the Crown's failure to protect colonists from the merciless Indian savages. I think it's about time that we bring in an actual expert to help us understand the lasting impact of the Declaration of Independence. Dr. Stephanie Freiberg is a professor of psychology at Northwestern University. We've been discussing the Declaration of Independence and the phrase merciless Indian savage. Can you describe how this language can affect a person's beliefs about a group of people?
Historically, it was a term that was used to justify the dispossession of our land, the exclusion of our people from the emerging frameworks of law, and instead it renders us a threat that needs to be managed rather than a people to be respected. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he did not have Black or Native Americans in that vision. We were not seen as the people who he saw life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as being for. In this case, the document functions as two things at once. It's a promise of universal freedom and an explicit dehumanization of the continent's original peoples, right, of us.
Many tribes tried to avoid involvement in the Revolutionary War, viewing it as a dispute between the Crown and its colonies. But after the British made claims that they would help stop settler expansion, many tribes decided to back Britain. After the colonists won the war, this was used as an excuse to raid and settle on native lands, despite some native tribes even fighting under George Washington. At the war's end, the Crown ceded all of its land east of the Mississippi to the new country, making native land free for the taking. America and Britain would go to war again in 1812. This is also the second time they've called conflict with the natives as an excuse for war. Echoing the Declaration of Independence, the new country accused the British of arming Native American tribes in order to resist U.S. expansion. At the center of that resistance was Tecumseh. Translation: shooting star. A Shawnee leader who had spent years uniting tribes across the East into a single confederacy to prevent American expansion. To many Native American communities, he was one of the last real chances to stop settler invasion. After Tecumseh's death during the war, his coalition collapsed, and the organized Native resistance east of the Mississippi never recovered. To further the blow, about 20 years after these wars, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Incoming government surveyors who dictated where Native Americans were allowed to live, inevitably forcing tribes to march wherever these areas were determined. Let's take a look at some national symbols that helped define America and how they evolved into tokens of patriotism, or rather propaganda. Soon after the founding of the country, the belief that the United States was destined to expand its territory from sea to shining sea grew in popularity. Known as Manifest Destiny, this ideology was rooted in ideas of American exceptionalism and justified this westward expansion as a God-given right. The poster child for this message? Uncle Sam. In the early 1800s, Uncle Sam was no caricature, but likely inspired by a real-life figure, a military meat supplier named Samuel Wilson, whose soldiers called Uncle Sam. Soon after, a cartoon version of Uncle Sam became an ambassador for Manifest Destiny. And Uncle Sam had some assistance from his female counterpart, Lady Columbia, whose name was inspired by Christopher Columbus. Even though Columbus sparked a whole genocide of Native Americans without even setting foot on US soil. Anyway, by the late 1800s, Uncle Sam began his rise to national fame on pages of American magazines and newspapers, later finding a home in the very political magazine titled Puck. Puck was the first successful American satirical magazine featuring political cartoons. In those cartoons, he had the job of convincing settlers that Native Americans didn't have any ownership of their own land and demanded that indigenous people either give up their ancestral lands or be pushed out by war. And pushed out by war they were. There were so many wars between native tribes and the settlers that they're often lumped together as the Indian Wars, a convenient way of sanitizing history for modern audiences by minimizing the magnitude of genocide settlers inflicted on tribes and their populations. These wars included roughly 40 named conflicts and 1,500 battles. In fact, one could argue many were not really wars at all, but rather massacres that included deaths of women, children, and elders, not just soldiers. And hey, it's all about branding. Now that we established Uncle Sam's true nature of a mascot image used as a propaganda tool to promote genocide, how about we hear from Dr. Freiberg and her thoughts on the matter? So we have just gone over the idea of Manifest Destiny and Uncle Sam's role in that. What is your perspective in response to these topics?
These ideas of Manifest Destiny, these ideas of Uncle Sam, are merely more representations that justify what has happened, that justify American society, that justifies the erasure and dehumanization of Native people. And, certainly if God meant for us to be put in that place, it becomes so much easier for people to kill, maim, take our land, take our items, take our practices of agriculture, and then dispossess us of them, right? And even own the things that we did bring.
So, Uncle Sam was a propaganda tool that became a mascot. Well, what about another USA mascot? The bald eagle. They are so revered that they are directly protected under at least 2 federal laws. However, long before the eagle became the national bird and the official seal of the United States, it had a distinct religious and cultural significance among Native Americans. In fact, because of these distinctions, today, only tribal citizens can legally possess feathers for religious and cultural purposes. The bald eagle is unique to the North American continent and represents strength, courage, and freedom. So, of course, this symbol would be repackaged by settlers and branded as a symbol of American national identity. Speaking of national identity, let's talk about citizenship. Over time, the US government began to change its policy from one of elimination to assimilation. One way it did this was by offering citizenship through an 1887 law called the Dawes Act. Before that, Native Americans had been excluded from birthright citizenship because under the Constitution and early federal law, they weren't considered American citizens. The Dawes Act offered citizenship to individual Native Americans in exchange for giving up their land and their cultural identity tied to it. For many Native nations, land was not simply property to be bought and sold, but it was the foundation of their kinship systems. Think agricultural traditions, spiritual practices, and their own way of governance. These systems depended on shared responsibility of the land rather than individual ownership, something the Dawes Act sought to dismantle in order to urbanize Native Americans into white Christian culture and traditions. The Dawes Act opened the door for conditional granting of citizenship. And shortly after came another method, war. Who's that? It's our old friend, Uncle Sam. Popular culture remembers Uncle Sam as a beloved patriotic uncle who gained prolific status during the First World War by asking, "I want you for US Army." Most ironically, Uncle Sam would become the US most loyal salesman. Native Americans would become the highest per capita rates of any racial group to join the country's military. One of the most prominent examples of that service, other than being the largest population to serve in the military, comes from the Navajo Code Talkers. In both World War I and World War II, 14 tribes used their languages to create unbreakable codes for the military to communicate in battle. To this day, Navajo remains the only unbroken code in all of modern military history. Anyway, 12,000 Native Americans served in World War I. Those veterans and many of their families were finally granted citizenship in 1919. A few years later, this was extended to all Native Americans under the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, the last racial group to be formally granted citizenship. Today, Native Americans are considered dual citizens, citizens of their respective tribal nations, the other, the United States. Let's go back to Dr. Freiberg. We've talked a lot about the discrepancies between America's supposed ideals and the experience of Native people.
So much of this idea about what it means to be American is tied up in these ideas, but it was never intended to be true for us. And I think that subhumanization of Native Americans is a really essential piece to understanding why today we could even question the citizenship of Native Americans.
What does dual citizenship mean to you as a citizen of your tribal nation and the U.S.?
This is my ancestral homeland. Where my people live is where my ancestors lived. And, continuing to be connected to that land and understanding the importance of that land for my identity and my children's identity is really important.
But hey, at least after granting citizenship, we had access to all these amazing freedoms, right? Wrong. Beyond land, this same system of dispossession extended into our spiritual practices, or should I say, our illegal spiritual practices. Just like birthright citizenship, the Constitution's First Amendment did not originally apply to us. And even after gaining citizenship, the US spent the next 50 plus years basically just ignoring it. In 1978, Congress passed the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act. And I'm not kidding, it has not even been 50 years since we could legally practice our own religion on our own land. Another thing you probably didn't know, since our modern history is rarely taught, according to Dr. Freiberg's research, over 87% of references to Native Americans in state academic standards were in a pre-1900 context. The best we get in American classrooms is stories like Sacagawea, aiding Lewis and Clark as they surveyed uncharted land. She's often viewed as a willing guide, but the reality was that Sacagawea wasn't given a choice to join the expedition, and the money for her services was given to her French-Canadian husband, who had bought and kept her as property. Oftentimes, American education reframes Native Americans as willing participants in their own colonization, and these ideas have become mainstream due to the American education system. A more obvious example, Thanksgiving. Schools love to romanticize the story as one of cooperation between Native Americans and the colonists, but that version leaves out that after the Harvest Feast, broken treaties between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag led to one of the deadliest wars in colonial history. To finalize this episode, and given the context of your work, Dr. Freiberg, what would you like people to take away?
We find that the more people believe that we're people of the past, the more they minimize the racism that our people experience, the more acceptable they think these racialized characterizations are. And so we have to undo these historical untruths, and recognize that terms like merciless, Indian, savage were terms that came about merely to dispossess us, not because that's how we were, but because it's how America needed to be able to see us to justify taking from us.
Thank you so much for your time throughout this episode, Dr. Freiberg. Now, what's to be taken away from the centuries of history we've discussed today? Clearly, the story of American independence that most of us are familiar with has a very specific audience. It justifies certain people's actions by erasing the experience of others, and those others tend to have a common recurring theme. When founding fathers, America's secular saints, called us merciless Indian savages in the Declaration of Independence, they made it clear that America wasn't for us. So, 250 years later, we have to ask, whose Independence Day? Okay. Now we can party.
All right. So who's ready to party?
That's funny. Yeah.
Funny indeed. Coming over to you, Sister Empress. What is your thoughts
Well,
on that opening video that we watched?
wow. Well, again, it's wonderful to be in this time period because we have so much access to information, and the kinds of information that is just unbelievably edifying, and that puts it mildly. It's just amazing to really be in a time period to know the truth and to see it unfold, as we speak. So, wow, great clip or great video, great presentation, and certainly the information, which we're going to go a little more into, because why do people celebrate this stuff?
That's the question we have to ask. Yes, indeed. So yeah, I started off asking that question at the top of the hour, and then I did get some feedback a little bit for Baba Moses, and then that's when we said we was going to get into some of the history to give people a little bit more perspective on what it is that we were talking about. All right.
Well, the one of the people in the clip pretty much said it, that this was never for us.
Right.
The people, many of the people that signed the so-called Declaration of Independence, many of the presidents, the initial ones, that is, they owned slaves. So, I mean, that's not rocket science.
Right. So that kind of gives us an indication on who the Declaration of Independence was actually for and what people it actually represented. Okay. So again, asking the question of these celebrations, these rituals, these horror days, why are we celebrating them? Right. And who are they actually serving? When we put our time, energy, effort, and economics into fueling them, all right, are they serving us or are we serving them? All right. And so just giving you a quick glimpse of history, you can see the sheer hypocrisy on the holiday itself, quote unquote, we call it horror days over here, and who it actually was meant to serve and represent. All right. I'm going to come back really quickly to get any more feedback on that. Let me just take care of a little bit of housekeeping, and then we can go ahead and move forward. Okay, so fair use notice, family. All right, due to the social nature of this site, this channel may make use of copyrighted materials, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner. Its application institutes the fair use of any such copyrighted material as provided in Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Law. All right, so fair use notice, accordance with Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. This information is for educational and informational purposes solely. All right, I got one more for you all. Content disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in the media or comments in this channel are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by this channel broadcaster. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. This channel owner claims no copyright to said content. The broadcaster of this channel cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. The broadcaster of this channel is a messenger or share of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this channel. If you have a complaint about something or find your content is being used incorrectly, please contact the broadcaster prior to making a copyright claim. Any infringement was not done on purpose and will be rectified to all parties' satisfaction. All right, let me stop my screen share there, and shout out to PBS for that last video clipping. All right. Let me ask any more additions on that piece. Bob Moses, do you have anything to add on that before I come back to Sister Empress?
No, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, Sister Empress wasn't here. The U.S. government was founded on white supremacy and white male chauvinism in particular. And the Declaration of Independence itself, Black people were not mature enough in the minds of the people at that point in time who were representing the ruling class or whatever, representing the government. And so in the Declaration of Independence, we are mentioned, and when the Native Americans and the indigenous people of this country were mentioned, they were mentioned as savages. There's something to be gotten rid of. And this is the foundation upon which this country was built. And until there's a different foundation, it continues on that foundation. Thank you.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you for that addition. Baba Moses. Okay. Any additions on that, Sister Empress? I do have several clips queued up, so let me know if you want to make any transitions as we move forward.
Yeah, Brother Moon, you can play the other clips, but I just want to add that, again, today was another day of reckoning and also of clarity. Before I go into that a little further, I want to thank those who really made certain that I got here, and it just So big shout out to Sister Dottie and of course Sister Yvonne, you Brother Lumumba, and of course Sister Basima. Today helped me to really realize the importance of family. And not that I didn't already know, but the family in such a way. I mean, we all have, of course, biological family, but I can tell you that when it comes to what some call the movement or other kinds of relationships that might be categorized as extended family, I can tell you that is so important. Now, I know for some people, they kind of use it in the context of friendship or, camaraderie or other kinds of things. But what I'm referring to is a little deeper than that. It's even deeper than long-term relationships that you might call friendships. No. There is something that exists amongst us that is very unique, and it's really geared to the specifics of freedom since today some people are focused on freedom. It's really geared to the ideals of and the notions of freedom and justice. So when you build relationships based on that, that's a totally different world. It really is, because it's not like a lot of other things, needless to say, and it's not something that you really are going to comprehend unless that's really where your mind and heart is. So rather than to have a certain relationship based on, certain types of norms or customs or other kinds of things that is so, not just obvious to people, but it's more well associated with people. People who strive for justice and freedom, and it is kind of more ingrained, or something that they really have an intention of doing, that's a different type of relationship. And today really helped me to kind of see that even clearer than I've seen it before. So again, as I looked at those videos, or I looked at the clip there, it just reminded me how so far away we really are from not just the truth, but from one another. Because the distractions that are put in our path now, it definitely is not about us fighting back, fighting the system, fighting against oppression. I'm not going to use words that are, to me now, kind of become a little more cliche-ish. And I'll kind of go more into that another time. But there is something that is really going on right now. And I kind of call it a process of elimination, where folks are going to have to make a clear decision on, you're either going to be about this, meaning the type of reality that this system, that this government has placed in our midst. People are either going to embrace that, or they're going to resist it. And the straddling the fence thing, that's getting ready to become an issue, best believe. So again, Brother Movie, people have been able to get away with that for a while, and talk out the sides of their mouths. But the time is coming where that's not going to be quite so easily done. But it also means that we're probably going to see more infiltration than we have in recent time. Right? So let's go to the next clip. Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, yes indeed. So let me go to the next clip. Right.
And while we're waiting for that, I just want to say that my brother Tutmos just gave me to try some watermelon that he actually grew.
Oh wow!
Okay. That.
All right. So again, family, Sister Empress is reporting live from the ATL, coming off of the No Kings Day, No Genocides gathering, in like I said, in ATL, put on by the People's Senate in the 250-year struggle for liberation for our people. All right. And so with that, matter of fact, did you want to give a report on that, or you want to finish, or get into these clips first?
I'll just give a brief report on it, and then I'll go more in depth as we go more into the program. But today's focus was, of course, on genocide, in conjunction with the fact that this is the so-called 250-year commemoration of the founding of this country, of this place. And needless to say, Philadelphia, of course, is the quote unquote birthplace of the nation, which is why I found Philly to be more interesting, at least for me, probably than any other city. Because when you know and have an understanding of the origin of something, it can help you to better not only understand it, but how to better navigate through it or with it. And I can tell you that, living in Philadelphia, even though I've traveled, to many cities, many countries and so forth, living in Philadelphia is a real experience because the Negroes there are like none other. And so I'm taking my time in writing the book, The New Philadelphia Negro, because as I begin to venture down that rabbit hole and realize the variations of the Philadelphia Negro, there's a Philadelphia Negro here in Atlanta. And of course, it wouldn't be the Philadelphia Negro, it'd be the Atlanta Negro. But the connection is you can see it. You can see it and you can feel it. And so again, I'm going to break that down for you a little further. But again, today's today gathering, which was out at the park, Malcolm X Park, by the way. And it was very festive. It was very interesting. And again, it helped me to realize that we must have our own everything. And I really mean that, family, probably more than I ever did before, because the struggle for our independence as a people is going to be hindered if we do not begin to make it clear who we are, what our positions are and why, and to do so with an uncompromising stance. And so I'm going to leave it at that for now. But again, I will be reiterating even more so than before that we must have our own land. We must have our own educational facilities. We must have our own capability to feed ourselves, to clothe ourselves, to provide medical care for ourselves. We must be able to do that because what's happening now is I don't even know how to put this, but the incapability to separate one thing from another, you see. And so again, it's going to be very important as things proceed that we make it very clear that even though we are, kind of in the same realm of things with others, there still has to be a distinct position. Because remember, and again, today's focus was genocide. All forms of genocide. And this is something we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight, because some people are under the illusion that genocide just refers to, say, for example, the so-called Holocaust, or, some other locations in the world where the people were brutally violated or brutally terrorized or harmed. Yes, that too is a form of genocide, but there are definitely some other forms. And before we close out tonight, I'm going to read to you what in international, I don't want to just say international law, in world law or world agreements, I'm going to share with you what genocide actually has been defined. And then you go for yourself and figure it out. As to, do you think that Black people in America has had acts of genocide, both past and present? And why is it that our own people kind of only focus on certain areas of genocide? They may talk a little bit about it, different types of genocide. Like, for example, Sister Pam today mentioned that genocide for her and others is about the food that we are being subjected to consume. So if that's genocide, then why are not other forms of genocide being either talked about or related to? And so I'm just going to say this, the number, the vast and growing number of Black women and girls that are missing, we might want to think very carefully about what else is that connected to. So I'm going to stop there for now, Brother Lumumba.
All right, all right. All right, and thanks for that addition. All right, family. And based on that video that we just saw, some of the same type of plays, they seem very reminiscent. Some of the same type of strategies, techniques, right? Where, these legislations, forms of legislations that have been put forth were not designed to have Black people in mind. And then, even when they were on paper, they were not actualized in reality. We still had to fight for the rights that were written in the books as far as it pertains to law and legislation. And I dare to say that we also need to have the right in order also to obtain dual citizenship. And so we'll discuss that more further in depth at a later date. Okay, as we begin to build more with plebiscite and pre-plebiscite sessions, family. All right, because we have to be able to establish ourselves as a body, right, and be able to develop that from aspects of elements of sovereignty. All right, so we can have our own aspects of governance, because we are owed that based on us being captured and held captive in these lands. And I'll be remiss if I did not also mention that there were Black natives as well, okay, because African people had circumnavigated the globe. So we were everywhere on every continent, okay, being the oldest people of the planet. All right, so least we forget, family. And so we have to look at these things and say, how are we going to actualize our human and God-given rights, our inalienable rights? Okay, but we have to be organized in such a fashion in order to make sure that we demand that we obtain them. All right, family. All right, let's get into the next clip. All right, let me share, and let's take a glimpse at what our ancestor Frederick Douglass had to say about the 4th of July. All right, so let me shout out to Democracy Now! All right, we're going to see a brief clip there. Let me share my screen. All right, here we go.
Today in this special broadcast, we begin with the words of Frederick Douglass. Born into slavery around 1818, Douglass became the leader of the abolitionist movement. On July 5th, 1852, in Rochester, New York, Frederick Douglass gave one of his most famous speeches. What to the slave is your 4th of July? He was addressing the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society. The legendary actor James Earl Jones read the historic address during a performance of Voices of a People's History of the United States, based on Howard Zinn's iconic book. The late great historian introduced the address.
Frederick Douglass, once a slave, became a brilliant and powerful leader of the anti-slavery movement. In 1852, he was asked to speak in celebration of the 4th of July.
Fellow citizens, pardon me and allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess their benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? What, to the American slave, is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. There's not a nation of the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour forth a stream, a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and the crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
James Earl Jones, reading the words of Frederick Douglass. Thanks for watching.
All right, let me stop my screen share there. Okay, family. And so those words, powerful, poignant, and rings true to this day, family. At that time, on July 5th, our ancestor Frederick Douglass called for the storms. It is indeed storming today. Called for the earthquakes. There is indeed earthquakes that have rocked the entire world. In a matter of 24 hours last week, there was 7 consecutive earthquakes. Since then, there has been 3 more. I dare say America and the world is indeed facing the whirlwind. Let me bring it over to Sister Empress. What's your additions on this?
Well, again, big ups to ancestor Frederick Douglass. And in listening to the great James Earl Jones, it kind of triggered something in my brain. And I was like, wow, when I hear his voice, for some reason, I can also hear resonance, some kind of connection to Paul Robeson. It just has a similar tone to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so again, our people recognized some time ago that this particular commemoration definitely was not for us. And we have to now ask ourselves, why are we still trying to uphold the kinds of observances that others observe when in fact we know the truth? See, it's one thing when you don't know something. I think there's an area in nature, for lack of a better terminology, that kind of says, okay, I'm gonna give you a walk with this one. I'm gonna let you ride with this one. When you don't know something. But when you do know something and then you still act as if you don't know, then I think there is going to be a response to that in another kind of way, perhaps. So I'm just saying to people that growing up can be a painful thing. That's why they call it growing pains for some. All right. Because, becoming more responsible or more aware or things of that nature can have, some residual effects. And so what I'm saying is people are, again, going to have to make some very serious decisions if they haven't already, some other decisions. And the decision is going to be, what are you really about or going to be about in real time, based on what you now know, not what, we were told or assumed or anything like that. What you actually know, in what way are you now prepared to act on that, to function based on that? And so I think that's what we're being confronted with in this day and age. If I may, Brother Moore, I just want to digress for one moment, because as we proceed, I want people to connect to something. Now, we often bring you information about the United Nations because, again, we know that is an entity, an instrument that connects all countries or many countries. So certain things as we proceed is going to be important to know that there is a connection to certain things that will enable us to build whatever we need to build. So with that said, hold on one moment. With that said, I just want to share, interesting enough, the page just disappeared, but there it is. Okay, I want to share from, again, the international level, or what we call natural law. And see, some people were aware of this, which is why it's in the Constitution, inalienable rights. That really refers to your natural rights, not rights that somebody can give you, rights that are automatically yours. It's innate, you were born with it. So let me just share with you a little bit about how genocide is defined by countries. Right? Not just by one person or a few people, but the agreement to recognize this as a fact. Just like, for example, when you do mathematics, there's an international agreement that 1 + 1 = 2, or that the addition sign is in fact the addition sign. You see, that's an agreement amongst peoples to recognize something as the same thing, right? So now, let's go to this. United Nations definition of genocide. Under the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide. Now note, this was developed in 1948. Which is why you will hear us talk a little more about things that happened after 1948. And the reason is because we know with that other countries really kind of have to recognize certain things, whether they want to or not, because they agreed to do so. All right, so that's why you'll hear us talk about some things that have happened in more recent times as acts of genocide that we want to literally have it conveyed and documented as such as the bombing in Philadelphia in 1985, an act of genocide. Okay, so with that said, hold on 1 minute. Okay, with that said, so the crime of genocide, which was developed in 1948, genocide is defined in Article 2. Now note, the document I'm referring to is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This means you, I, anyone that's considered human, you have rights. Not based on what I said, not based on even what Webster say in terms of dictionary, what countries have agreed to say and withhold and uphold. Okay, so with that said, Article 2, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, an ethnic, racial, or religious group. Okay, so an entity, a group that has a nationality, a group that has a religion, a group that has an ethnicity, and so forth. All right, a specific group. So that's considered genocide when there is an intent to destroy. Now, that doesn't mean destroy just in the taking of the life. That means destroy in the essence of that group as well. So again, this is why it's important that we have these sessions so that we can clarify what it is, some of the things that we're talking about. And we have to do that with the masses of our people. So as we share information with you, the whole idea is to share it with others, please, in one way or another. Okay, so just a few more moments on this particular topic or issue. So with that said, again, let me just repeat, in whole or in part. So it doesn't have to be a whole lot of people. In part means any number of that group of peoples. All right, so keep that in mind. So the other thing too that goes with this is, hold on, jumped away again for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay, it means the unaliving of members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Now, I want you to, there's more. This is just Article 2. So there's a whole lot more. So we're just going to give you little bits at a time so that you can really kind of internalize it. But I want you to hear what this is saying. I want you to think about how over the years, this has become what some would call codified, meaning a part of that state law or even federal law or even sometimes city law. How some of these things are now parts of the actual day-to-day, laws in your city or in your state in one way or another. And sometimes it's not necessarily as blatant as, the people being placed in an oven, you see. So just wanted to give you that little bit of insight, and we're going to go a little more into what some of that actually represents today, particularly with the court systems, which again is what today's session here in Atlanta in talking about genocide was about, from different angles, from different positions, from different perspectives. Okay, back to you, Brother Lumumba.
All right. Yes, indeed. Thank you for that addition, Sister Empress. All right, family. And just a quick recap, that oration that was given by, so that was a double bubble with Ancestry, because we had Ancestor James Earl Jones reading a passage from a speech from our ancestor Frederick Douglass, okay, who asked the question, what is the 4th of July to a slave or to the slave? Okay, and that was given July the 5th, 1818. Okay, so if this was understood in 1818, I have to ask the question, why would we choose to celebrate or turn a blind eye to those realities that the Declaration of Independence did not have Black indigenous folks in mind? Then why the hell and what the hell are we celebrating? And with that, let me bring you another piece of history, okay, concerning July the 5th, okay, who some might not be aware of. All right, so let's share. All right, this is a learning experience, family.
The 4th of July commemorates America's independence, but we know that 250 years ago, freedom was only for a few. That's why Black people used to mark Independence Day on July 5th. On July 4th, 1827, New York became the 7th state to abolish slavery. It was a moment that Black people wanted to celebrate, and rightfully so. But how could they do it in a way that made other Americans take notice? After lots of discussion, the newly freed African Americans decided to hold a community-wide celebration on July 5th. They knew there would be plenty of parades and partying around the 4th, which meant there would be lots of drinking. And white people and alcohol can be a dangerous mix, especially when racism is involved. But that didn't stop more than 4,000 Black New Yorkers from marching down Broadway with bands playing music, going to the historic African Zion Church. There, abolitionist William Hamilton gave his acclaimed Emancipation Address. It was one of several celebrations across the state marking the end of enslavement. In the decades that followed, abolitionists continued pressing for emancipation across the country. They included Frederick Douglass, who delivered his famous speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July," on July 5th, 1852, in Rochester. These demonstrations were intended to hold up a mirror to the so-called land of the free and home of the brave. Today, July 4th is complicated for Black Americans. We still fire up the grill, watch some fireworks, and even do some drinking ourselves. But for us, the pomp and circumstance that decorates the rest of the country still comes with a side of irony. The 5th of July holiday is largely forgotten, especially with the wider celebration of Juneteenth. But what do you think? Is it time to run it back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
All right, let me stop my screen share there, family. All right, not sure if who was aware of the significance of the 5th of July. Okay, so again, family, we can apply this knowledge, apply this information. All right, if you still want to have celebrations, why not shift that to the 5th of July, understanding the historical significance of it and understanding the truth and the screaming hypocrisy of the 4th of July and the celebration basically of our enslavement, right? The celebration of colonization. All right. So with that being said, let me come back to you all for your additions on that. Sister Empress, you have anything to add on this?
Well, again, Brother Mumba, the illusion of inclusion is something that we've got to begin to break these cycles and again accept the realities, accept the truths. But also in doing so, know that when a people, and you can just look at history, excuse me, when a people obtain their freedom, for lack of a better terminology, are no longer under the rulership or the subjugation of another government or peoples, they then develop their own. And actually, that's kind of what these people here did. They did not want to be under the rulership of another government. And so the whole idea was to create their own. Now, certainly that wasn't a good thing for us, but for them, that was, not only a significant or important thing, it was just, something that they felt they really needed to do and did. That's the thing, and did. So my point is that obviously, and again, not just in terms of America, but any country that no longer is under the rulership of another country, it is pretty much mandatory that they develop their own, meaning how do they want to be governed, you see, and other things. And we have not had that opportunity to do so, which is why, again, we're going to be holding these pre-plebiscite sessions. Plebiscite meaning and pre-meaning before we actually reach the point of coming together to vote on some things that we want to see happen collectively, and that we're going to, be committed to make it happen. There will be sessions leading up to that, such as this one, that will give you insight and information about what certain things are, so that when the time does come to vote, and again, we're talking about our citizenry or our village or tribe or clan or whichever word we will be using as we decide to proceed. And it will be that group of folk who will be voting on very specific things for the group. And again, it's for any of our people that are inclined to want to do that. If you're not inclined to do that, then that's cool too. That's totally up to you. But for those who realize that we got to move this thing forward, and we need to do that like now, based on all the history that has happened in the past, then you're going to get the opportunity to do so, to have some say in the development of our own constitution, for lack of a better terminology. So that's kind of where we're going with this, family, on this so-called day of July 4th. And remember, for those who do not know, it was July 5th that they actually found Mumia Abu-Jamal guilty.
Wow.
Okay. Back to you.
All right, family. Anyone else have any additions based on the information that we have shared thus far? We have Baba Moses as well as Sister Dot.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Greetings. Thanks once again for joining us, Sister Dot.
I don't have anything to offer. I just wanted to commend you guys on such a great job. These are things that should be going out in our neighborhood. I'm telling you, people don't, and I didn't know July the 5th was when Brother Mumia was charged. I didn't know that. That's new to me. And I thought I read all his reports. I must have missed that one. But anyway, back at the ranch. This is so great. This is what's okay. Anyway, I love
And
it.
Sister Dot, did you
Thank you
know
so
about
much.
the July 5th celebration that Black folks started?
Well, I heard about July the 5th, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of, instead of July the 4th,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I didn't think it was like, I don't know. I guess I never considered it as something real until they came up with Juneteenth,
Right.
because they were saying instead of doing it July 4th, they did it July 5th. But nothing really took off in terms of the separation for our emancipation to Juneteenth. So
All right. Thank you for that addition, Sister Dot.
thank you.
Right. And so, yes, just touch base on Juneteenth really quickly. That is one of the days that we celebrate as far as, our independence. All right. As far as our, quote unquote emancipation. Okay. And so, just for those point of clarity, and shout out to Brother Pollinator tapping in with us. Point of clarity, though, family, concerning Juneteenth. I know some people have raised issues with Juneteenth based on the fact that, some say that that's a holiday that was given to us and it was symbolic, so on and so forth. But that's not actually accurate historically. That's actually a day that we took, right? So, folks, our people have been celebrating Juneteenth way before it was considered a national holiday. All right, family. So, just make sure we don't get it confused and make sure that we're historically accurate. That's the day that we took, based on the historical context of the masses of our people being able to actualize their emancipation based on Black soldiers, ushering it in, with arms. Okay. So that was a liberative stance that we took. All right. Not because it was sanctioned, as a federal holiday. All right. So just want to bring some clarity on that, family. All right. We're gonna keep it moving.
I say.
We're gonna keep it moving, family. Let's go to our next clip. All right, let's get some more historical context. All right, let's learn about some additional Black history.
We the reason America, not just with the Civil War, brother. Let's go before the Civil War. Let's go to the Louisiana Purchase. The country is 3 times the size it was because the Haitian Revolution with the Saint Overture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Christophe and Pétion and Cecil Fatiman and Boukman and Macandal, when they destroyed Napoleon's army, defeated the greatest general the white man ever had. Right. Yep. Our army of defeated the greatest general the white man ever had. And because the Haitian Revolution bankrupted Napoleon, he sold his American territories to America for pennies on the dollar. I remember that. The Louisiana Purchase loan quadrupled the size of the United States of America. So when I tell you America wouldn't be America without black people, America wouldn't be America without black. That's a fact. We the reason America, America. Not just with the Civil War, brother. Let's go before the Civil War. Let's go to the Louisiana Purchase. Do you know that this country is 3 times the size it was? Because the Haitian Revolution went to Saint Overture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Christophe and Pétion and Cecil Fatiman and Boukman and Macandal. When they destroyed Napoleon's army, army defeated the greatest general the white man ever had. Our army of defeated the greatest general the white man ever had. And because the Haitian Revolution bankrupted Napoleon, he sold his American territories to America for pennies on the dollar. I remember that. The Louisiana Purchase loan quadrupled the size of the United States of America. So when I tell you America wouldn't be America without black people, America wouldn't be America without black. That's
All right, family, let me stop my screen share there. Okay. All right, stop I say to my Haitian brothers and sisters out there. Okay. One of the first free black, colonies from African descended people who freed themselves through armed struggle and allowed America to expand its territory by the defeat of the French and Napoleon and his army. Okay, so again, family, we got to put things in historical context. And how dare anyone say that this is not our country? All right, that we don't have stake and claim to it, as does the other tribes of natives in this land. Another case for dual citizenship, for aspects of sovereignty in order to govern ourselves in the same fashion that the well-known Native American tribes were granted. All right. Message.
Brother, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just was going to say that we're in, as many know, we're in the 21st century. And it means that when we do the reflection on things that have happened in the past 250 years in particular, 400 years as well, we need to also know that we need to up the ante. And what that means is, where in the previous clip, there was a discussion about dual citizenship. So at this stage of the game, we need to and will be not only talking about dual citizenship, but And this is, now, again, this might hit some as a little, off, but this is actually something that is being discussed in other circles. And that is more of a world, shall we say, citizenry or citizenship. Now there are a few countries talking about the capability to have borderless travel. And again, we'll be sharing some of that with you in the very near future. But the point is, we have to start thinking in a manner that's a little more advanced. So yes, we got to do some primaries or some preliminary stuff, but also keep in mind that what we do today is going to also benefit or assist the future generations. So we can't just think about what it is we're doing now. We got to also incorporate in that, or bring into that idea, what it's going to also, connect that to the future. So again, yes, we definitely need to look at citizenship. And I want people to start thinking more about that as well, as your right, not as some complicated political whatever, but as your right. You see, to have that. The other word that I want folks to start thinking a little more about is autonomy. And the reason why I suggest that is because the word sovereignty right now kind of gets sometimes a little little kind of, I don't know, because people have been using it, and for some, they've been using it in a way that has kind of left the bad taste in folks' mouths, right? So autonomy kind of means the same thing. So I'm just saying that in our conversations, to also help identify to a greater extent what we're talking about, there will be certain words that will perhaps even be a little more descriptive based on the psychology, the other kind of dynamics that we're talking about. And keep it in mind, auto means kind of self, you see, indirectly. And so this is what, when we say self-determination, see, that's a principle in the development of a people. As you will hear talk more about as we proceed, because again, our position is with the We Charge Genocide 21, and I'm sure Brother Lumumba will remind you of the Ubuntu tomorrow, right? Well, the meeting that we have weekly, but again, it's about thinking about the now as well as the future. So again, as a word I want folks to think more about, autonomous or autonomy, when it comes to citizenry or citizenship or nation building, community building. Think about it in the context of being autonomous, self-developing, self-sustaining, those kinds of things. I yield.
All right. Thank you for that addition, Sister Empress. So those are some things we can look at as we continue to develop, and to look at how these things can be applied, under certain legalities, right? And definitely in agreement, with the fact that I consider myself, based on history, legacy, and ancestry, consider myself a global citizen. All right, as was mentioned previously, African people had already circumnavigated the globe well before a lot of these claims were taken, as far as who has jurisdiction over these lands. All right, and how can that be enforced when people had already inhabited them, had their own folkway Norways, laws of governance, so on and so forth. Okay, so if these things were already in place and being enacted, then they take precedence. Okay, so we have to look at these things in historical context as well, in order to make sure that we can have a holistic perspective.
And if I make just a quick sidebar on that, be real clear about this though. And Brother Moon was correct in one way, but also because we are hitting it from different angles, meaning the obtainment of our, what I call full emancipation. Because the proclamation, emancipation, was a form of freedom, but it was not full emancipation, obviously, because laws came into existence soon after that to, regulate and restrain, and they were laws, they were legal. But anyway, again, keep in mind that here's a simplistic saying, but it is true in the interaction of countries or nations, and it is this: it's a thin line between love and hate. Also, keep in mind that the rules or the laws that pertain to either war or other things related to war, even if you don't declare it as a war, the natural order of things, unfortunately, is, without getting into the morality or the ethics of it, it's kind of like may the best man win theory, concept. So even though we know that peoples were here, even though we know that the people who now have the greater physical control over it definitely did so by some very vicious means, the idea of the development of so-called mankind and all of that consists of wars, or if you don't want to call it wars, consists of interactions that is to determine, who or what is going to be more dominant in that land. See, so I don't want folks to not have a bigger picture of some realities. But with that, also know what your rights are to either undo some of that and or to have it removed from you or us. You see, but you need to see the whole picture. And so what I'm saying is, according to certain other laws that countries do in fact embrace, if in fact you do certain things to obtain or acquire land or other kinds of assets or resources or whatever, if you can do that, if you can accomplish that, then so be it. And this is just a fact of life, a fact of matter, whether we like it or not. And definitely we don't like it, which is why we have to be agents of change. Because other than that, we'd be subjected to it if you're not either resisting it or trying to change it. So I just want to, give you some food for thought as we proceed. This is kind of like a Black Poli-Sci 101, kind of touches upon that in certain things. But we are obligated to make sure that the masses of our people see every angle of this, so that when you have a conversation with someone, they can't play you. They can't bring up things that you haven't already thought about or looked at or have some idea about or whatever. And y'all know that's what people try to do, right? To make it seem like, we're not on top of our game or what have you. So again, I'm just giving you some of the other little pieces that go to this. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And again, big ups to the MWM Sisterhood and extended family again, because, without you all, our steps now would not be as, not just as easy, but would not be as productive.
All right. Thanks for that addition. Just to add on to that really quickly, I did want to, make sure I noted that there are precedences that, are implied, in that same token, that same fashion, based on heritage, based on lineage, and based on inheritance. Okay, so we have to make sure we have these understandings as well so we can apply these things. All right, because in a lot of fashions, it's not really taught that we, had claims, had stakes in these lands, that we developed institutions and civilizations in Europe, in Asia, and all across the globe, right? Where you see these ancient structures and civilizations. They only teach, for the most part, that Africans were in Africa. Then they were captured and then taken to these other lands. That is false. There were Africans across this entire planet, African descended people across this entire planet on every continent that developed megalithic structures. If you read the book by Ivan Van Sertima, They Came Before Columbus, that'll give you some indication to that. Okay, so we do have rights that we can be able to imply or apply based on lineage, inheritance. Okay, so we got to make sure we have the full understanding of our history so these things can be applied. Thank you for that addition, Sister. All right, let me bring it to the floor if there's any additions based on what we have discussed or shared this evening. All right, any additions? Thanks for joining us, Sister Sekhmet. Any additions?
Thanks for having me.
All right, Ashe.
Thanks for the program. Always
Indeed.
thankful to you all.
All right. Anything you want to add before we move on to the next clip?
I'm just listening in. I just want to, you know, hear you say, as well as other individuals, that our people is scattered across every continent. And I was telling individuals today, um, that our people populated all four corners of the world, and and also educating them about that they love to tend to every culture, um, every other ethnic group. They try to hide, our melanated, you know, people with darker hue that is from those continents, like Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
Afro Colombia, everywhere in the world, even Japan,
That's right.
even Korea. Even I was telling, we was just on this topic today, while I was out, talking to individuals at festivities that I just came from. I'm glad you were still on today, so I could be able to see it, because I didn't want to miss it. But anyway, and then also talk about the contributions,
Mm-hmm.
and building this place they call America KK. Our people built America, and then off the slave labor, and Empress always talk about, President General, about this Disclosure Act, where majority of these corporations and insurance companies, and they owe us. They owe us, and basically, if they handing out all this free money to other ethnic groups, I mean, where's ours? I'm continue to say reparation, restitution, reparatory justice, and also cut the check. And it's long
Okay.
overdue, and we got to continue saying that. And then thank you for talking about Ivan Ben Sertima, because that is a great, that ancestor, great and mighty ancestor, basically made it clear, as well as our other, freedom fighting ancestors that talked about, that we are the beginning, we are the original uh men and women of this land everywhere. So Dr. Ben Yakin and Dr. Clark and Sharice McIntyre, and we could go on and on and on about, our ancestors who, you know, made it clear, you know,
Indeed. Sheikh Ante
you know,
Dia.
even with religion, all of that, like I was telling, I said Islam and all those different, um our people was leading those. And I even said that the presidents, they were all black, and they just turned them into Caucasoids, and we just had a good conversation, just to you know everybody else is celebrating America in their own way, but let's celebrate it in our way. And I show them that, we don't deal with the red, black, what is the red, white, and blue, but we created our own black American flag with the stars, which is red, black, and green, because that sim- shows that our contribution to this world, America and the world, worldwide. So thanks for the conversation, and always educating us to empower us, so give thanks.
I say. I say. All right, family. So with that being said, we're going to keep it rolling. All right. and continue to share this information. We got two more clips for you. All right, let me come to the next one, and let's hear a little bit more information as it pertains to the Declaration of Independence and this so-called celebration of freedom here in the United States. All right, and the sheer hypocrisy of those conflicting historical facts.
Your celebration is a sham. Your liberty an unholy license. Your prayers and hymns nothing but bombast, fraud, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. Those aren't my words. They belong to the one and only Frederick Douglass. In 1852, 11 years after he first stood before a crowd, and he said that America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. And almost 200 years later, his words are just as powerful. In 1776, while colonizers celebrated freedom from British rule, they were carrying out a genocide against Native peoples that would eventually claim tens of millions of lives. At that same time, trafficked African people were enduring the gravest crime in human history. Chattel enslavement wasn't a footnote to America's founding. It was the engine responsible for it. Because colonizers knew exactly what freedom meant. They knew it well enough to fight for it, to die for it, to write poetry about it. And still they denied it to millions. Think about this. They celebrated with fireworks and they raised toasts all night long. While just beyond the plantation house, my ancestors were held in bondage and endured violence on such a grand scale that it is now illegal in parts of the United States to teach the history of the godforsaken institution to the nation's children. July 4th didn't mark the birth of freedom. For trafficked Africans, it marked its execution. But my ancestors lived through it anyway. They survived the ships and the auction block and the barbarity of American chattel slavery. They built families back from ashes over and over because breaking them was the entire point. And they refused to stay broken. That survival isn't a footnote to American history. It's a monument bigger than any statue that this country has ever built. So today, I'm not celebrating independence. I'm celebrating the fact that centuries of torture, terror, and degradation could not erase my people. That's what the 4th of July means to me. And if you didn't know, now you know.
All right, all right. Shout out to our sister Chanel Oliver, bringing the facts and the receipts. All right, emphasizing what we've been discussing this entire evening, family. Okay. And I have one more clip for you all, and we can get into further discussion and dialogue. Now, this is based on how people like to uh, raise up and hail up some of the quote unquote founding fathers as heroes and pillars of society and ushers of democracy and so forth, right? But we really have to look at the historical facts and look at the sheer hypocrisy that fundamentally this nation stands on and was built upon. All right, and so we see the shaking of the House of Cards family, and we know that if things are not built on a steady and firm foundation, it is, of course, subjected to fall. With that being said, let me come to this next clip, family, and I'll be able to share some little known history about the quote unquote founding father.
He's probably the most famous man in the country. But even after all these years, there's one question that historians have failed to answer conclusively. What did George Washington really think about slavery? His record is full of contradictions. As president, he passed laws that upheld slavery and others that limited it. He mused about a plan to abolish slavery while also profiting as the fifth largest enslaver in Virginia. The key to understanding Washington could be in the story of one young woman, Ona Judge, an enslaved housemaid turned fugitive who Washington tried to recapture up until his death. Her story complicates the legacy of this celebrated president so much that people today are trying to erase it. So why was the most powerful man in the country so fixated on capturing this one young woman? I'm Hernie Bott, and this is In the Margins. Washington's position on slavery had been shifting even before he took office. In 1775, as general, he banned Black people from joining the Continental Army. Within a year, Washington flip-flopped, recruiting Black soldiers after the British enticed thousands of enslaved people to their side by promising freedom. As the founders were writing the Constitution, the question of slavery was still being debated. The nation's leaders came to a compromise with the slave trade clause, which basically kept the status quo and allowed the slave trade to go on for 20 years. In 1786, Washington seemed to have personal doubts about slavery. He wrote to a close friend, quote, "It being among my first wishes to see some plan adopted by which slavery in this country may be abolished by slow, sure, and imperceptible degrees." End quote. Meanwhile, he and his wife Martha had enslaved about 300 people on his 6 sprawling Virginia plantations, who he had both inherited and purchased. That number included Ona Judge, her 4 half-siblings, and her mother. In 1789, when Washington became president, Judge was just 15 years old. She was Martha's closest housemaid in bondage. She drew her bath, arranged her hair, skillfully mended her dresses, as fitting for a first lady. Judge and 6 other enslaved people went with the Washingtons briefly to New York before settling into the temporary capital of Philadelphia. Then one day, the Attorney General Edmund Randolph visited Martha Washington with an urgent message. 3 of the people Randolph enslaved had declared their freedom. Pennsylvania law mandated that all adult enslaved people in the state must be set free after 6 months of residence. They cited that law to the Attorney General's face and ran off. At the time, Pennsylvania was one of the first states to limit slavery. The Quakers in Philadelphia had vowed to shun the slave trade in 1711. By 1780, the state passed the first anti-slavery law that freed enslaved people once they reached the age of 28. Martha quickly wrote to Washington, who turned to his personal secretary, Tobias Lear, with a secret plan. He wrote, quote, "I request that these sentiments and this advice may be known to none but yourself and Mrs. Washington." End quote. Washington wanted Lear to discreetly move the people he enslaved out of the presidential home every 6 months, effectively resetting the legal limit for keeping people enslaved. The Washingtons carried out this ruse for 5 years. For a young nation, the Washingtons' actions set a dangerous precedent that the most powerful people in the country could skirt the law when it served them. So while he may have pondered some vague plan to end slavery, when confronted with sacrificing his own comfort and wealth, Washington chose to keep people enslaved. The Washingtons were committed to keeping Judge and the others as lifelong captives. So how did she manage to slip out from right under their noses? After all, an escape wouldn't have been easy. Judge was on call around the clock and lived in the president's house along with about more than 24 other enslaved people, white servants, and presidential staff. Judge even shared a bedroom that was attached to the Washington's bedroom. But in 1796, Judge received news that made her determined to leave. Martha had decided to give Judge away as a wedding gift to her notoriously temperamental granddaughter, Eliza. This act showed Judge that no matter how long or how well she served the Washingtons, her life could be traded away on a whim. As a Black woman, she had no legal protections for her bodily safety. She would be separated from her family and exposed to unknown dangers of physical or sexual violence, a threat that made new environments fearsome for all enslaved people. Eliza's older husband-to-be already had biracial children from his time in India. In planning her escape, Judge never revealed who helped her. But here's what we do know. Philadelphia at this time had a growing population of free Black people, which numbered about 5% in 1790. A few years prior, the Free African Society was founded by abolitionists Absalom Jones and Reverend Richard Allen, two Black community leaders who had bought their freedom. Allen was known to help enslaved people run away. He also owned a chimney sweeping company, and in March 1796, records show that he paid a visit to the presidential house just 3 months before Judge's escape. We can only speculate if coded looks or words were exchanged. Judge later revealed that free Black people in town helped by hiding her few possessions ahead of time, raising her chances of survival after escape. This happened years before the Underground Railroad became more formalized with designated safe houses. People who ran away were punished with whippings, mutilation, or deprivation of food, clothing, and shelter. Anyone who helped Judge was also putting themselves in serious danger, consequences that were put into law by Washington himself. In 1793, he approved the first and less famous Fugitive Slave Act that allowed enslavers to capture freedom seekers across state lines and made it a crime to help anyone hide or escape. The next year, Washington signed the Slave Trade Act of 1794, which banned the U.S. from exporting enslaved people. On May 21st, 1796, at 22 years old, Judge disappeared into the night as the Washingtons ate supper. This was one of the only times of day when she wasn't waiting on them hand and foot. Judge headed to the ports. One historian says she likely wouldn't have known where she was headed and who would meet her, a safety measure for everyone involved. Ultimately, Captain John Bowles took Judge on board his cargo ship, which was carrying molasses, potatoes, and coffee, all headed north to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. To protect the captain, Judge didn't reveal his identity until more than 10 years after his death. 2 days after Judge escaped, the Washingtons put out an ad offering a $10 reward for her return. Absconded from the household of the President of the United States on Saturday afternoon, Oni Judge, a light mulatto. His personal writings reveal his anger at what he called Judge's ingratitude and Martha's considerable desire to have her back. Judge stayed hidden from Washington until he received a letter from Elizabeth Langdon of Portsmouth. The daughter of Senator John Langdon, she recognized Judge after passing her on the street. Judge had settled into a quiet life of domestic work. She married a free Black man named Jack Staines and had a free daughter whom she named Eliza. Washington first asked Joseph Whipple, the Portsmouth collector of customs, to persuade Judge to return without making a scene. Though Whipple managed to meet Judge by pretending to hire help, he couldn't convince her to leave. Frustrated, Washington sent his nephew, Virginia Senate member Burwell Bassett Jr., to Portsmouth. He instructed Burwell to bring Judge back to Virginia, not Philadelphia, by any means necessary. Bassett showed up to Judge's home and lied, saying that she'd be set free if she returned. She responded, quote, "I am free now and choose to remain so," end quote. Bassett came back later with several other men and ropes to bind her. They broke down her door, but Judge wasn't there. She and her family had escaped again and hid in a nearby town. 6 months later, Washington passed away. Though it's frequently cited that he freed the people he enslaved in his will, That's not exactly what happened. Only William Lee, his most favored enslaved person, was freed immediately. Washington's wishes were that the other around 120 enslaved people served Martha until her death. Martha finally freed the remaining enslaved people at Mount Vernon in 1801. Some historians say she feared for her life after a mysterious fire and rumors of poison, while other historians suggest she grew tired of the financial burdens of keeping people in bondage. What did Judge think of her former enslavers? She didn't disparage them directly, but as a deeply religious woman, Judge offered the observation that she never heard Washington pray, and that, quote, Martha read prayers, but I don't call that praying, end quote. Judge ultimately outlived the Washingtons, as well as her husband and 3 children. When she passed away in 1848, she had lived through decades of change as pro-slavery and anti-slavery advocates battled in court and in the public sphere. The same year that Washington died, a group of Black Philadelphian leaders petitioned the government to end the slave trade and repeal Washington's Fugitive Slave Act. We can trace this lineage of organized resistance in the Black community even to today. In January 2026, the National Park Service was ordered to remove an exhibit about the enslaved people in Washington's house as part of the executive order on restoring truth and sanity to American history. Outcry from the public was swift. Just 1 month later, a federal judge ruled that the exhibit be restored. The judge wrote, quote, "This court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to dissemble and disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical fact. It does not," end quote. Ona Judge is part of that historical record. Her story reveals that Washington was unable to resolve the contradiction between freedom, the ideal he fought for white Americans, and slavery, the institution he clung to for enslaved Africans. As the nation searched for its identity, Washington was hugely influential as the first president and remains so as we examine his legacy 250 years on. Perhaps the lesson lies in looking not just at Washington's life, but also the people who challenged him, like Ona Judge and the Free African Society. She was born into bondage, yet she was willing to stand up against the most powerful man in the country to claim her most important ideal, freedom. Thanks again to Morgan.
All right, family, and there you have it, right? The bigotry and hypocrisy of the quote-unquote founding father who chased an enslaved woman to his dying day, who instituted this Fugitive Slave Act in order to capture her back. Okay, so this is the true history and fundamental foundations of this nation and this quote-unquote independence, right? And pursuit for liberty and justice for some. With that, let me bring it back to the New Day family here in the yard, and let's have any additions to this story. I will pull up as well some of the results, the ending results of the pushback, the legal fight for the reinstating of the placards at the Washington Memorial, okay, which was indeed allowed to be taken down. And now they gave the powers, or they sanctioned the powers to reinterpret those placards and give a new historical spin and remix to actual factual history. Let me bring it back over to Sister Empress.
Yeah, again, and just to recap on that. So there was a group in Philly that really fought for the information, the exhibit. It's kind of in the form of an exhibit. And with that, you could kind of walk through an area and see the various kinds of things that happened. The stuff was kind of put on walls. I guess you could say walls, but at any rate, you were able to walk through this area and read, and also hear, because some of it was, they had like a TV or like a screen that would also enable you to hear the story of the great Onajad. And so again, particularly, and it's right in the midst of downtown Philadelphia. In fact, it's right across the street from what's known as Constitution Center. It's across the street from, or down the way from, where the so-called Liberty Bell is. So to have this kind of exhibit, to have this kind of information where you could kind of just walk, it's like a little tour, sort of. It's almost like a museum, but it's outside, which I found very interesting. But anyway, so people were able to, if you went to to Constitution Hall, or you wanted to visit where the Declaration of Independence was signed, you could also see, they had pictures, drawings rather, that depict, certain kinds of things that reflected the story that was on some of the placards, as Brother Mumba mentioned. And so, it was, I guess, maybe at least 20. And so as you're walking, you're reading, and you're also listening to the story of Onajad and the story of the Washington, blah, 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 blah. So this stuff was removed, right? Removed. And so now new ones are going up with the version of the story that the Trump administration wants to have up, as opposed to what you just heard in that clip. They're going to have some of that, but they're going to also add in stuff that, deflects from what you just heard. So I just wanted to give you a little more insight into what it is that is happening in Philly, as in other cities, because now that this has gone to court and it has passed, it is perfectly okay for the Trump administration to now change anything that is particularly on federal property. Okay, and so with that said, they can twist it and, make it in whatever way they feel is best for the general public. This stuff is, you couldn't make this stuff up. History is being rewritten as we speak. Certain things are being hidden from the masses as we speak. Because remember, there's a lot of tourism in downtown Philadelphia, again, because it is the so-called birthplace of the nation. So there's a lot of tourism down there. So now to remove a very important piece of history and put a new slant on it, that should tell people right then and there that this system is not going to ever allow there to be a certain type of progression beyond a certain point. And when it does happen, they're going to take it back.
Indeed, indeed. There you have it, family. Okay, so what you see here on the screen being shared now is the original placards that were in place, okay? And subsequently, a large majority of them were indeed taken down, as you see in this latest depiction, okay? So let me just give you a briefing of what the actual ruling was and what was utilized in order to justify these actions. Okay, let me go ahead and share the screen really quickly here. The slavery memorial at the President's House in Philadelphia was removed by the National Park Service on January 22nd, 2026, following a directive from President Donald Trump's executive order to eliminate quote-unquote divisive historical content. The exhibit, titled Freedom and Slavery in the Making of the New Nation, honored 9 enslaved individuals who lived and worked at the site during George Washington's presidency and had been in place since 2010. Lived and worked is very liberal in that depiction. All right, they were enslaved individuals. Okay, so let's not try to dress it up. Legal and public response: the city of Philadelphia filed a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration, arguing the removal violated a 2006 cooperative agreement and federal law. While a district court judge initially ordered the exhibits restored, calling the removal an act of dismantling objective historical truths, a federal appeals court ruled in June 2026 in favor of the administration, allowing the change to stand. Advocacy groups, including Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, also known as ATTACK, condemned the action as historical erasure, while the administration maintained it was aligning part content with quote-unquote shared national values. And currently, as of July 2026, only 16 of the original 34 panels remain, with the Trump administration preparing new interpretive materials that critics say downplay Washington's role as an enslaver. The names and footprints of the enslaved individuals on the memorial wall were not removed, but the contextual storytelling panels were taken down and are stored at the National Constitution Center, where they will be reinterpreted. Let me stop my screen share there, family. Okay, so as you can see, a literal erasure of history. All right, and you see this taking place throughout the Trump administration with the removal of books in classrooms and certain curriculums all across the nation to try to cover up the dastardly deeds of the history of hypocrisy of the United States of America. There you have it, family. Okay, so that's why it's imperative, super imperative and important, once again, for us to be able to be in control of our own image and narrative, and why it's important to help us to continue to support us as we push further and further to make sure that we have our own independent Black media. All right, so continue to support New Day Restoration and all of our platforms to make sure that we can continue to tell the truth and bring the receipts. And as they say, shame the devil.
So with that said, another quick little sidebar. So, okay, this year marks the 75th year commemoration of Paul Robeson and William Patterson taking the We Charge Genocide petition to the United Nations. So we don't want to just talk about history. We want to talk about commemorating the history with our own actions. So with that said, this being the 75th year, we want to commemorate that. But we want to commemorate it with an actual action. So what we're going to be proposing tomorrow for Ubuntu, in terms of the discussion rather for tomorrow, is as we proceed, now December is the actual time period that the petition was taken to the United Nations. Now you got to know that this is why history is so important, because if Paul Robeson had not done that in December of 1951, we would not have the kind of reference point and also stand, of a certain type. Meaning, we now have on the record that one of our ancestors literally took a document declaring that our human rights were being violated. That's documented. So I'm saying our ancestors gave us information and documentation. So now, And again, these are the kind of things that make a society or make so-called the development of civilization, for lack of a better terminology. So my point is, as we prepare for the commemoration, some of our upcoming sessions are going to focus on developing our own Declaration of Independence. How about that? Where's that at? Where are we saying? Right. Where are we saying those who are the descendants of people, African people who were enslaved, African people that were terrorized, etc. Where is our statement? And I'm not talking about just a speech or whatever, documented and filed. Because again, we got to think about the future. Just like we can reference Paul Robeson, William Patterson, our next generations need to be able to reference, well, this is what our people did in 2026, et cetera, et cetera. So my point is, when you come to some of the next sessions, be prepared to hopefully participate in the dialogue or put something in the chat, lending to how we need to start stating our Declaration of Independence. If this government had the right to do that, to get away from King George, which is what they did, that's what today was the signing, recognition of the signing, where is ours? Where have we signed anything as a collective that says we no longer choose to be subjugated, whatever the wording is. But there's no actual, documentation, particularly in present day, that we can relate to. So again, as we look at the next steps, we need to put things in place. These are called instruments. We need to put some things in place that enables us to move forward in such a way that the future will be a little more secure.
Ashe. Indeed.
Oh, one quick thing on that, Brother Lumbi, and again, when you have something like that, other countries can then support it.
Ashe. All right, family. So tap in. Let's continue to build. We can build further on the MWM Black Print Agenda and Historic Preservation Society, family. All right, let's continue to build these institutions so that we can make sure that we have control and maintain control over our own imagery, narrative, history, and legacy. All right, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of others. All right, family. So let me come back to those in the yard. Any additions, family? I'm gonna open up the floor. Any questions or comments before we get ready to close out for this evening? All right. All right, family. So with that being said, I'll be getting ready to close out for this evening. Tap in with us tomorrow, as Sister Empress mentioned, with the Ubuntu Justice Jubilee Committee, coordinating and organizing meetings every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information on that or any other initiatives, programs, etc., you can contact us by emailing nationalmwm@aol.com. Again, that's nationalmwm@aol.com. You can also email powerman2282@gmail.com. That's powerman2282@gmail.com. You can also text 267-636-3802, 267-636 3802. All right. So, let's not just read about history, but let's make sure that we are able to collectively make history. All right. And continue to sustain and maintain our great history and legacy. All right, let me bring it back to Sister Empress for final thoughts and closing remarks for this evening.
All right. Well, again, family, another great new day, and we're looking forward to, of course, continuing and our growth and development. And with that said, again, I'm in Atlanta right now. Very, very interesting things I'm observing and really starting to pay closer attention to. We're committed, meaning MWM, Minute Valor, other groups and organizations and persons are committed to keeping the history and the legacy of real Black movement in terms of the fight for justice and freedom. And doing it in a way that is our own way of doing it, not someone else's. And it's not to say again that, we're not open for suggestions or whatever. That's not it. But what is happening is, the things have a feeling to it. This is why with our music, they called it soul music, because you could feel certain things in the music. Right. Well, and that's changing, but we're going to change that back again to some real stuff. But the point is the work and the striving and the journey for us as a people. And I have to keep it at that because we are the only peoples in this land who were in fact kidnapped and brought here in large quantities. Whatever number people want to agree or disagree on, we do know it was large quantities. That's for sure. And it wasn't no other people to that degree, if it was any ever. The point is, we have to look at it in that context. And so again, over the years, there has been a feeling, a essence of striving for freedom. And over the years, I've seen it kind of dissipate. I've seen it, you could feel it less. Not to say it wasn't there, but you could feel it less. Well, now we know that those who get that, who understand it, who appreciate it, we have to rise up. Because if not, our struggles, our movements, our fight for our freedom and the honoring of our ancestors is going to be more about what other people might think that should be happening. Under the guise of supporting or helping or whatever. I don't know what, but anyway. So we thank everyone again. This was a great day, a great, and by the way, the entertainment was off the hook today. We'll go back into that another time because I'm going to invite a brother who was there today. I'm going to invite him on. But again, please pass the word. We're looking for artists. March the 25th, of course, was a historic signing, and we want to make sure that we are able now to connect with that and get some stuff done. So lastly, my point is this: we can no longer wait. We can no longer sit back and just, think the stuff is going to happen by way of osmosis or prayer or whatever. All that helps, but we got to be very strategic and proactive now. So let's set up some timetables. Let's literally take on the responsibility of saying, for the year 2026 through 2027, here's some of the things that we plan to try to accomplish so that we can start being more accountable, engaging our productivity. Lastly, We Charge Genocide 21 membership is available. We'll give you more information about it tomorrow because we have to develop a civil society, and we need to do this by December. Again, December will mark the 75th year anniversary of the signing of the We Charge Genocide petition that was introduced by Paul Robeson and William Patterson. So we want to be ready to do some action. So again, that's the 75th year, and that's December. Also, December 10th, every year is International Human Rights Day. We want to be ready. But even closer to that, or rather more coming up closer, is next month. Next month, August the 23rd, we want to be in New York. Now, we're not going to be able to do the major concert yet, but we will be doing something in New York on August the 23rd that will commemorate the signing of 123 countries on March the 25th, and begin to establish the connection to meet with representatives from some of those countries to determine where do we go from here. So again, we have to be recognized as a unit, as a entity. So again, membership is going to be very important, because the members will be the making of the first phase of our civil society. And we'll go more into that tomorrow, why that's important. Because if we're going to obtain allyship, if we're going to obtain dual citizenship, if we're going to obtain other kinds of things, it has to be structured in an operational kind of manner.
Ashe. All right, family. So let's make sure we are continuing in that true and authentic spirit of, as well as those same energies, frequencies, and vibrations of freedom. All right, based on our illustrious lineage and history, and in the honoring of our ancestors. All right, family. So we are closing out for this evening. Thank you once again for joining us for this edition of New Day, Resurrection, and Liberation. And of course, I want to give thanks first and foremost to the Most High Creator Creators. Give thanks to the ancestors and the elders, those who have shed blood, sweat, and tears and paved the way to allow us to be here today. I want to give thanks to you all. Thank you all for tapping in on our virtual platforms, those who are on board, those who have heard it this evening, those who will tap in at a later date and watch the replay. All right, thank you for your time, energy, and effort, dedication, determination, and discipline. I bid you all truth, justice, peace, love, freedom, power, prosperity, protection, patience, and divinely principled purpose. I want to say, let us continue to strategize, organize, and mobilize. And finally, I want to say Pamoja Tutashinda, which means together we will win. All right. Until next time.
In the 1970s, as he served a prison sentence for armed robbery, H. Rap Brown became a Muslim and changed his name to Jamil Al-Amin. On March 16, 2000, at 10 o'clock at night, Fulton County Sheriff deputies served a warrant for Al-Amin, a missed court date on a traffic charge. A man who pulled up in a Mercedes near Al-Amin's house opened fire, killing Deputy Ricky Kinship. Authorities found Al-Amin.
Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, front line, and one back down. Pause that poetic, H-Rap Brown. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, front line, and one back down. Pause that poetic, H-Rap Brown. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, formulated in the 60s. The height of civil rights erupt in the city streets. No justice, just fighting for the liberty. Arrested for riots, but not before you heard the cry. Violence is American as cherry pie. serving as minister of justice before the Panther Partnership end in abruptness. Organizing against racial attacks, armed self-defense for a nation of blacks. With presidents he sat, enforced toting gas, organized registered voting acts. The young and passionate often will become activists, killed by guns of savages, far from pacifists, clashing with racist nationalists, government run by capitalists. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown, calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down, poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown, calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down, poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown. Wanted and taunted by the FBI, Brown shot by a deputy and left to die. No answer needed, no question why. Just to survive, decided it was best he hide. OT, lay low obviously, regroup and retroop possibly. A year later, shootout with NYPD, arrested, convicted, attempted robbery. Upstate in Attica for 5 years. Guess the time helped get his mind clear. Reset the revolutionary pioneer. Came home strong with refined ideas. Converted to Islam on his deen. H. Brown, not Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Moved to Atlanta, new on the scene. Opened the grocery store, got the community clean. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down. Poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down. Poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown. A decade later, the year is 2K, serving a warrant for failure to appear to his case. Supposedly deputies leaving his place. He was headed home, they meet him face to face. 2 cops shot, one was dead. From the hospital bed, mumbled and said, Jamil Al-Amin, the gunman alleged. Captured in Alabama, on the run he fled. Still in possession of the murder weapon. Body armor dressing for further protection. No alibi, whereabouts, words in question. Charged and convicted, no heard confessions. Sentence, life, no parole. 24 hours locked tight in a hole. 20 years later, hoping the fight will turn old. Light barrels keep fire burning in their soul. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down. Poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown. Cool cat, black shades, afro crown. Calm and collected, speaking that profound. Vanguard, frontline, and one back down. Poised and poetic, H-Rap Brown.